Behind the net to Sanderson. Orr! Bobby Orr! Orr to the Boston Bruins! Willie Mays just brought him down to his feet. This is the truth. This is the big difference. Hold it. Hold it. You're not that free. All right, man. Let's shoot up the wall. Reggie Jackson is in his third home run of the game. The head's cut out of the air. The ball is pulled in. A break overhead.
In Canada, he's a god. In Boston, he's a living saint. But what history records is the simple truth. He swept into the league at a very high speed, and by means of his athletic genius, revolutionized the game. By crossing the blue line, he became the link between Gordie Howe and Wayne Gretzky. Ladies and gentlemen, number 4, Bobby Orr.
Here comes Orr, busting in, one-handed, a fantastic goal!
Every kid in the 60s and the early 70s, especially, grew up saying, I want to be like Bobby Orr.
Flipping on the side, and he scores! Bobby Orr, short-handed goal to tie it up. What a Bobby Orr goal!
Even during the frigid winter when you're outside playing pond hockey, no socks, you know, because Bobby Orr said no socks.
Orr heads for the net. Score! Bobby Orr! How does he do it? I don't know.
My life's a disappointment because I didn't turn out to be the next Bobby Orr.
What a stop by Bobby Orr! You've never seen anything like that. He covered behind Platt.
I remember at my first communion that you had to take another name, and mine was Bobby for Bobby Orr.
And there's Bobby Orr, and what more is there to say about this youngster? The defenseman has all the moves and can break the game open any time.
He could get from point A to point B faster than anybody else ever could.
It was like the difference between a Porsche and a Yugo. He's a 12-cylinder car against 4-cylinder opponents.
He came down the ice, went through everybody, went right around the net, and wrapped it in. Nobody caught him. He never even made a move, just skated right by me.
Bobby Orr got caught in a turnover, and Ivan Cornway, who they called the Roadrunner because of his speed, took off with the puck. And Bobby Orr was at his blue line, and Ivan was at the center ice line, and Orr caught him before he got to the net.
Bobby fit in as the greatest skater that ever played the game.
Here comes Orr up the middle. Over the line, trying to go in. He does! He scores! What a goal for a hat trick! Bobby Orr!
You always waited for the moment when he got the puck behind his own net, and you could see him looking and scanning the situation. And there were those 5 players in front of their goaltender, and you knew none of them was going to stop him.
From his wheelhouse behind the net, Bobby Orr defied the gods of hockey by daring to cross the blue line and charging the goal.
Defensemen never rushed the puck past center. Defensemen never went into the opposition end. They always stayed in their point, and they played defense.
You're told get the puck up to a forward as soon as you can and just follow up behind. Don't take any chances at all.
Why would well-conditioned athletes playing defense basically stop playing once they hit the center line? Bobby Orr was that transitional player. He was good enough, strong enough, quick enough, talented enough that he could be part of the offensive rush and still get back to defend.
Bobby Orr changed the concept of the position. He, in fact, reached back into a dim, dark, distant past and reintroduced the concept of the rover back into hockey.
I had the puck a lot, and that's pretty good defense when you have the puck, because they've got to get it from you.
The one game, we were supposed to be checking Bobby Orr, and we shut him right down. I mean, Bobby Orr had just a nothing game. I think he only had 2 goals and 4 assists. So we really jammed him that game.
All of a sudden, he's got running room. Getting around Harris, putting in, scores! That's Bobby Orr's 100th point of the season. No other defenseman in the National Hockey League history has ever done it.
Bobby was just boom, bam, zoom, being into that. I mean, it was incredible.
I remember him coming and thinking, you know, is this the top speed? I better just keep backing up. And then all of a sudden, bing, he was gone.
He could accelerate faster than I've ever seen anybody else. Just take off like, just boom, he's gone. and try and catch him. You can.
I never seen anybody beat him one-on-one, and it happens to every defenseman once in a while. I never seen anybody that could do everything that the game needed at such a high level like he did.
His shot, no big slap shot too often, but more of what they call a snap. You know, just back to his hip and through the puck. And he could just blast it.
Penalty's draw to Orr. Quick shot, score! Bobby Orr off the face-off.
He was a tremendous passer. You know, he's like a center iceman. You know, he could hit you with a soft pass, a hard pass.
Swoops in front. Nice shift. Over to Juice. Scores!
Block shots as good as anybody that ever played the game.
To Velmer. Blocked by Orr. A key save by Bobby Orr.
We went into New York one night, 10, 11 shots on us. Bobby ended up, I think he blocked 18.
He was like a tiger on defense. He was the toughest guy out there. He could fight, he could hit. Nobody did it with as much force and as much flair and as often as Bobby Orr did.
Bobby could hit you like a freight train if he so chose.
Kept in by the Chicago Blackhawks and Gotti. Left right into Orr, and down he goes.
Orr brought something new to every part of the game. When his team was shorthanded, he killed time by monopolizing the puck, recalling games of keep away in the ponds of his Canadian youth.
You rooted for penalties because you wanted to watch Bobby Orr rag the puck, and he would just skate. It was like watching the Globetrotters.
It looked like a dog chasing its tail. He had the puck, and he went around about 3 different times with 2 players chasing him. And around and around and around they went.
One time in Oakland, we were killing a penalty, and Bobby picked the puck up behind our own net. He went up the right side. He lost his glove.
And he just kept the puck, and he went all around the ice and in behind their net, came right back against our bench, picked up his glove, kept the puck like nothing was happening.
Jerry Cheever says, "Would you like the racing form, Phil?" I says, "I know. I'm not doing anything here. I'm watching him go." I'll bet he had the puck a minute and 20 seconds. And then he scored. I mean, we all just looked at each other and went, wow.
In his 4th season, Orr became the first backliner to win the scoring title. But perhaps even more impressive was that the shy native of a small Canadian town won 8 straight Norris trophies, awarded to the NHL's best defenseman.
When I had breakfast in the coffee shop that first morning that I was there, the waitress and everybody seemed to understand that the stranger from the United States was there because of Bobby Orr. Probably nothing had ever happened in Parry Sound until Bobby Orr started playing hockey.
Our icon was Bobby Orr. He was the one that was taking the mantle of Parry Sound, putting on his shoulder, and putting Parry Sound on the map.
When Bobby Orr was born on the banks of Parry Sound in 1948, they say he already knew how to skate.
He used to come out and skate with us and play around with us. He was just a little fella, and we'd just give him a stick and a puck and let him go. We'd skate in what they call a big sound. You shoot a puck and go for half a mile to chase it. Well, we did all that and had fun doing it.
We had a lot of kids playing hockey, and we only had one rink, so we had to wait our turns to get inside to play. So 15 on each team, drop the puck, and away you go. And that's really how we developed our skills.
You'd start first thing in the morning, and you'd go home at 4:30 at night, and you'd take your skates off, and your feet would be frozen. You'd cry like heck, but it was fun all day.
It meant freedom. They didn't have to pay for ice time. They didn't have to worry about the lights going on and off. They didn't have to worry about a referee.
Those were my best times, the memories, playing with my friends, no pressure. We just had fun.
Rapidly developing into a hockey prodigy, Orr was 11 when he joined the Parry Sound Shamrocks and flourished under local hockey guru Bucko McDonald.
Orr would play at our level, and he would also play at the level above us, and he would play the whole game for both teams.
He was playing with players that were 3 and 4 years older than him, and he was standing out above them.
He trained hard, and when he was just a kid, he'd shoot a weighted puck with lead against the board in the garage. He'd shoot that there till it pretty near drove you nuts inside the house, and he'd do that day after day after day.
Few outside of Perry Sound had received word of the phenomenon. In 1960, 2 Boston Bruins scouts traveled north to evaluate 2 14-year-olds in a Bantam League tournament. Instead, they discovered Orr.
The way he moved the puck out of his own zone and the way he handled himself. It wasn't long after that game started. We were really interested in this 12-year-old kid.
When they first discovered him, he was not preeminent physically. It was just that he had this amazing gift from God.
To recruit the young prospect, Ren Blair, coach of a Bruins minor league affiliate, took his team well out of its way to Perry Sound. Harry Sinden, Blair's captain and Orr's future coach, was not happy.
He says, you know, Ren, the guys are complaining. Now we go much further, and every time we go to Perry Sound, you disappear. What's going on? I explained to him. So he said to me, the kid's that good. I had spent 2 years romancing, I guess is probably the right word, Bobby and his family.
Ren used to come up all the time and talk to us. And of course, he was pretty young, and he was still going to school. So finally, we made a deal.
The romancing was less than extravagant. A free stucco job on the Orr residence and $2,800 in cash bought Bobby's signature on a Bruins contract. Now the prodigy was a pro.
The first time I saw Bobby, we were both 14. I sat in the stands and watched him play, and I couldn't believe that this guy was the same age as I am.
That's when everybody first started to say, who is this youngster? What makes him so good that they'd take him at 14 years old and plunk him against 18, 19, 20-year-olds?
An all-star in each of 4 seasons with the Oshawa Generals, Orr was prevented by NHL rules from joining the Bruins until he was 18. Meanwhile, Boston fans waited as the Bruins finished in the cellar 3 times.
He was the phenom. He was the future of the Boston Bruins, and we all heard about it. He came in, he's a foot short of a parker meter, 129 pounds, but a bullet. Wow, could he fly.
I had heard about him from the Boston writers for years. Bobby Orr is going to save the Bruins.
It was like these various John the Baptists were coming to Boston saying, there's this savior coming.
By 1965, everybody who covered hockey in the National Hockey League was waiting for this guy.
By the time that Bobby got to Boston, that city was so ripe. We'd been in last place for so many years we couldn't count on all of our fingers how many years Boston hadn't got out of the basement.
He just took the puck the first time we had a little scrimmage, and he just right through the whole team. Everybody just got, their eyes just went, ooh, look what we got here.
I went to one of their practices, and I couldn't believe it. I had never seen anybody like him. It was like an old horse trainer must have walked out and saw Secretariat for the first time.
I'm at the Boston Bruins training camp. I opened up my door, and there's a player laying on his bed. And I said, oh, hello, Mr. Busick. He's the captain, and I'm rooming with the captain. He said, you don't call me Mr. Busick, you call me John or Chief.
I had him over to dinner as an 18-year-old. He said, hi, Mrs. Cheevers, thanks, Mr. Cheevers, hi, Mrs. Cheevers. And he left, and I said, in about a week, it's going to be Mr. Orr, when they find out about him.
He was, without a doubt, the best player on the ice in the very first game he ever played.
In that inaugural game in 1966, Orr earned the respect of his boyhood idol.
I'm playing against the man that I think is the best player that's ever played the game, ever will play the game, Gordie Howe.
I'm in front of the net, and all of a sudden this lumber hits me right in the back. It hurt, too. I came in on my circle left the first time, circled right there a little time, and then the third time I ran over top of him.
I think he wanted to let the kid know that the big guy was still around, but he hit me real hard. I could see little birdies.
All the other muscle boys come running at me. Bobby said, hold it. He said, I deserve that. And I said, my God, if the kid's got that much talent and that many brains, he's going to go places.
From one end of the NHL to the other, Orr's manhood was tested. He gave as well as he took.
There just wasn't any way that the players would let a player come in and dominate the game without him having to stand up to this type of treatment.
If somebody asked for it, he gave it to him. And he didn't have to take any back seat as far as throwing his dukes around.
One night, he started with the toughest guy on the ice and beat him up, and took the second toughest guy on the ice and beat him up, and tied with the third toughest guy on the ice.
Working against Chicago, and Keith Magnuson is agitating him the whole game, wanting him to fight.
He came over to me, he says, "I'll see you back here with about 30 seconds to go."
Bobby just went over to her coach, told him about 30 seconds to go in the game to send him out. And that was probably one of the worst beatings I've seen somebody take. And when Bobby gave it to me at center ice.
I was tested, and in the beginning, I did fight a little bit. I felt I had to show them that I would get up if they knocked me down.
Despite suffering the first in a series of knee injuries, Orr's 13 goals and 28 assists were enough to win the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year. But the Bruins won just 17 games.
People holler down, and Harry Senden was our coach at the time. He'd say, "Senden, get all off the ice. He's making the rest of the team look bad."
If he got the puck, we wouldn't go across their blue line. We'd just back 5 guys up and hope like heck we could trap them in our own end somewhere.
Although as great as Bobby was, Bobby still needed a little bit of help.
In 1967, help arrived from Chicago when the Bruins traded for forwards Ken Hodge and Fred Stanfield and center Phil Esposito.
I don't think anyone thought those 3 players would produce the way they did for us. So you bring those 3 players in, and boy, they take off, and all of a sudden, we're a real team.
Flying high in Orr's formation, the Chicago Three helped the Bruins rise from the ashes, finishing over 500 for the first time in 9 years.
The fear Orr put in the opposition always allowed a real intelligent player like Esposito to get himself in the clear. So while you're chasing Orr down, Esposito's getting in position to put it in your net.
Orr controlling, wheeling, behind the net. A backhander! Esposito scores!
Esposito, who had never scored more than 27 goals in a season for Chicago, averaged 57 over 8 years with Orr. Once the Humpty Dumptys of the league, the Big Bad Bruins had become a source of civic pride.
It's a working class city, an ethnic type city, and people who have struggled for many years. The nature of that team was perfect for its fans.
Our guys were everywhere, at malls, at schools, and so on and so forth. And by doing that, we were developing fans. We were friends.
He used to just drop into hospitals. We'd be driving by one, he'd drop and say, "Hey, we got an hour. I want to go see some kids."
These kids would look up, they'd be in bed, they'd have their little teddy bears and stuffed animals with them. They'd look up, "Oh, Bobby Orr." They'd all get something.
Everybody wanted their kid to be Bobby Orr. You never saw so many hockey rinks. When I was growing up, there was one hockey rink in the city.
They started building rinks in every neighborhood. Everybody was playing hockey. Yeah, basketball didn't exist when I was growing up. You couldn't find a basketball court. And the Celtics at that time won 11 championships out of 13 years. And they were second on those sports pages once Bobby Orr arrived.
Orr attracted millions of non-hockey fans. Women could watch it. Hey, look at that handsome kid. Look at him go. Didn't have to understand the game. Didn't have to know what a blue line was.
The crowd at the Boston Garden, you would step on the ice there and it would shake. I mean, it was just, you knew they loved you.
By 1970, the Bruins were ready to follow their young leader to the promised land.
Bobby Orr was on a mission, and his mission was to take the Boston Bruins out of the doldrums, out of the basement, and try and win them a Stanley Cup.
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Bobby Orr.
Now, Bobby Orr, I'm told that you are the highest paid 22-year-old Canadian in the history of this country. Is this true?
Well, I'm very happy with what I make.
That's amazing. Yeah. Eagleson and you are going to sit down with the Boston team pretty soon and talk money for next year. And the story around the sports fields is $100 grand a year. Is that reasonable?
Well, I'm very happy with my contract.
Tough, fast, and talented on the ice, Orr remained the quiet boy from Parry Sound who shunned the night world of fame and celebrity.
I was a little shy. I didn't want to go out. I just wanted to kind of hide in my room.
We'd go to a restaurant to eat, and he was so shy that if he noticed somebody looking at him, it was pay the bill, let's go have room service.
He wouldn't come in the bars. He would stay outside, and he'd just drive around until about 12:30 at nighttime, and I'd come out strolling out of the bar, and he'd pick me up, take me home.
Bobby was just such a shy kid that he couldn't be very comfortable with people staring at him, and they would just stare at him.
He was embarrassed, introverted, to the point where he'd hang out in the trainer's room.
I said, Bobby, lighten up. Enjoy life. The best hockey player in the world. Enjoy it.
The mix of Orr's self-deprecating nature and aggressive brilliance on the ice endeared him to his fans. In 1969, the 21-year-old was embraced as the city's favorite son when he led Boston to a franchise record 40 victories. Then, in a playoff game against Toronto, disaster struck.
And they pushed Bob over. He was kind of bothered by the pressure from the side and wasn't watching up ice. And I stepped in and hit him and knocked him unconscious. Once he went out on the stretcher through the doors, then the place exploded.
What? Crowd was crazy. Chan, I want to kill him. I remember the guy kicked the glass down behind him in the penalty box and come at him with a knife. He jumped out of the penalty box, Patty Quinn.
They had to get a police escort to get Pat out of the Boston Garden. Not only were Bruins after him, but the fans were after him. It was a scary situation.
The very next night, the second game in there, they had me hung in effigy. 16,000 of them were chanting, "Kill Quinn."
He was rooming with Wayne Cashman the next day. I said, "How's Bobby doing?" Cashman looked at me and he says, "Well, I'll put it this way. He answered the phone 3 times last night, but it never rang."
Boston fell to Montreal in the second round of the playoffs. In 1970, Orr scored 120 points, nearly doubling the record for defensemen. In the Stanley Cup Finals, the Bruins were up 3-0 over St. Louis, when Boston Garden was forever rocked.
May 10, 1970, nobody that was in New England that day will ever forget.
Sudden death overtime between two fine hockey teams, the Boston Bruins and the St. Louis Blues.
A typical Bobby Orr determined play to do it to win the Stanley Cup.
Westfall rolled it in front. Sanderson tried a shot that was wide.
I knew he was going to come to the net because he was coming in on an angle that he always came in on, that if he didn't get it, he was gone and in defensive position.
If the puck had been knocked by me, we might have had a problem there. Probably would have been a 2-on-1.
Bobby Orr behind the net to Sanderson. Orr! Bobby Orr scores, and the Boston Bruins have won the Stanley Cup. Orr!
What was he doing up there in the first place? Well, that's Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr was just as great in the offensive zone as he was in defensively.
It wasn't the greatest goal that was ever scored. It was the 4th game of a 4-game sweep in a one-sided playoff series. It was the greatest picture ever taken.
We reenacted that 1,000,000 times. Somebody would have to, okay, you trip me, I'm Bobby Orr, I go up, I'll put my hands like this.
It couldn't happen to a better person at the time. Bobby had a Cinderella year, broke all sorts of records.
In 1970, Orr became the first player ever to win all 4 major awards: MVP, Best Defenseman, Playoff MVP, and the scoring title.
I can remember the look. His dad was there, and I saw the look on his face, and it was great.
It's so great. I don't want to say. This team, unbelievable. The guys that are hurt, they're out yelling for us between periods. They're in the stands, they're fighting for us. The guys that are playing, goaltending, we put everything together. Just a great bunch of guys. Great.
Doug, how do you feel about it?
This is the happiest day of my life.
Winning a second MVP award in 1971, Orr was the first player to notch more than 100 assists. His brilliance on the ice and his quiet manner in the locker room set a higher standard for his teammates.
When you see your best player giving 110% every night, and you better be prepared to do that. So therefore, he brought it out of you. He brought the best you could play out of you.
He always would say, you could play better. And then he'd walk away. And I'd say, I know. And I'd look at him, he'd just shake his head.
You didn't talk to her when you lost. He was a mean, mean loser. That alone made him a leader.
They were playing in Oakland. The Bruins kind of had an off night and were behind 6-1 at the end of 2 periods.
He got up, hold it. He got up, stood in the middle of the room. He says, okay. He says, nobody has shown up. Nobody in this room has a sweat yet. He says, do you think we could win this one? Let's put a show on. And we scored 4 goals in the first 3 minutes. And we beat them 8-6.
The first player to win 3 straight MVP awards, Orr led the Bruins into the 1972 Stanley Cup Finals against the Rangers.
You had the natural Red Sox-Yankee rivalry. So you had this real Boston-New York hate.
People would throw rocks at the bus, and it was like guarded into town, out of town, hide in the hotel because you were going to bomb it, whatever you're going to do. That was crazy.
Everybody was even, except for that one player, Bobby Orr.
Orr with it, and Vadnais and Sater out. Orr holds, spins away from McGregor to Busick, and he scores!
It was almost like Houdini going underwater in a safe and somehow getting out of it.
Orr keeps it in at the blue line. Orr moves away from McGregor with a beautiful move. Shot, score!
I got on the wrong side of the ice, and Bobby, made this little move. I was kind of going east, and he was going west. It was a great goal.
Orr looked like a whirling dervish. That play really won the game, and the cup for them.
Game over, series over. He was the difference.
Of the 4 goals Orr scored against the Rangers, 1 came in the decisive 6th game. He set postseason records for a defenseman with 19 assists and 24 points, and he became the league's first 2-time Conn Smythe Trophy winner as playoff MVP. All of it was done on 1 good knee.
Have you stand right over here in case you don't know what it is. The Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup with Bobby Orr. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Bobby, precisely, what about the knee, or can you comment on it now?
No, it just gets a little sore, and within the next couple of days, I'm going to see our doctors, and they're going to decide, and if they decide they're going to operate, they'll do it, I think, around the 2nd week of June.
After undergoing his 3rd knee surgery, Orr sat atop the hockey world, king of all he surveyed. What he could not see, even from that perch, was a future darkened by serious physical and financial problems. In 1974, Orr led the Bruins to the Stanley Cup Finals. A year later, he won his 2nd scoring title, amassing 135 points. But after 9 seasons, his reckless style was taking its toll.
He put himself in spots and took hits that most other players would have bailed out on, but he wouldn't do it. And that ultimately shortened his career.
You can't go up to Bobby and say, Bobby, take it easy, don't carry the puck. That's insane.
He skated so hard and all the time, too, and he used to try to do a lot of turning, and the players would just catch him on the blindside him once in a while, and down he'd go. He took a pretty good beating.
He crashed, he went through holes, he forced holes, and ergo, the knees.
I like to carry the puck. I would take it from end to end, and when you play like that, you're going to be hit a lot. And certainly my style didn't help, my knee problem, and I was hit a lot.
We all were robbed of a lot of good hockey by Bobby Orr simply because his knees just gave out and couldn't take it anymore.
Orr's multiple knee operations were performed before the advent of modern sports medicine.
If you twist your knee and it hurt here or it hurt there, it could be a cartilage or ligament, and let's go take a look, and they'd give you a big cut.
I went to visit him in the hospital once after one of his knee operations, and he was in terrible, terrible pain. He couldn't put the sheet on top of his knee. It was that painful.
Well, they went up outside here twice. Two scars out here. They went that way twice. They come up over here, they use the same scar up over here a couple times.
Bobby's, they were like road maps. He had no cartilage left to protect, and it was just bone rubbing against bone.
He had these shin pads that were so full of gauze and packing, they were about twice the size of everybody else's pads. but he never, ever said a word. Never complained once.
You've never heard anybody ask that type of question about Orr. Was he courageous? Was he tough? Everybody knew he was.
You could never discuss it with him about pain or leg. He didn't want to hear it. He just wanted to play.
Toughness isn't always fighting or body checking or nothing like that. It's the guy who tapes his leg up and goes out and plays when he shouldn't and is the best player, like Orr was.
Although injuries limited him to 10 games in 1976, Orr summoned the will to compete that summer in a new international tournament known as the Canada Cup.
There was that sense that he was doing it on something other than smartness and natural ability. He was just willing himself to do it.
He could hardly move. His knee was so bad. You'd have to ask him to get off the ice, just save what you got for the game. And yet when the game was on, he would be the best player on the ice. That was the most courageous thing that I saw in the 15 years that I played.
Orr hits the line. Orr getting skating room. Orr going right in. He shoots. He scores!
Many people question that I played in the series. They think it hurt me. I knew it was close. The end of my career was close.
Between periods, I recall Bobby just taking the socks down and just putting ice bags on both knees. I mean, for him to perform in that series was beyond human.
Esposito trying to control it. He does. Out to the point. Here's Bobby Orr winding up the shot. Scores!
This was his moment. And it showed as soon as the series was over. He had done some damage to himself in that series and just wasn't able to recover.
It was a great, great experience. It was really my last series. I was so thrilled that I could do it.
Orr gained the MVP award as Canada prevailed, beating the Czechs in the final. But the war-torn defenseman had little time to rest in the afterglow. His golden days in Boston were over.
The Bruins had expressed an opinion that he didn't have many games left to play. And I think that hurt Bobby to hear that.
Unable to reach an agreement with the Bruins, Orr became a free agent and signed a 5-year, $3 million contract with the Chicago Blackhawks.
When Bobby Orr went to Chicago, it was like Babe Ruth going to the Yankees. It was not supposed to happen. Bobby Orr was supposed to be a Bruin his whole life.
He had no business being in that uniform. It would be like you take a lion and you put him in a zebra's skin. And what the hell is he doing wearing a Blackhawk jersey? It was awful.
Now the fans of Boston are picking on the Bruins for getting rid of Bobby, who's their favorite son.
The fan reaction was we had 13,000 season ticket holders and ended up with 5. Everybody just deserted us when Bob left and went to Chicago. The fans blamed Bruins management and myself for Orr leaving.
In Boston, Gary Doak, who was one of the defensemen from that era with the Bruins, he owned a restaurant, and behind the bar was a big picture of Bobby Orr in his Blackhawks uniform. And we said, geez, Gary, what are you doing with a picture of him in his Blackhawks uniform? And he goes, that's so if Harry Sinden ever walks in here, he gets to look at that while he's having his drink at the bar.
He came to us, and the poor guy, well, you know, the stadium, you had to go up the steps. There's about 12 or 14 steps. He'd limp up the stairs.
He figured that his knee would carry him at least 50% of what he had done in Boston, but it didn't even carry him 10%.
The knee was so bad that the leg was withered. It was like somebody else's leg.
The end was slow and painful. After playing in just 26 games over 3 seasons, Orr retired in November of 1978.
I'm disappointed, but I am relieved. I would not want to go through the rest of my life thinking, well, maybe there was that chance. I now know I'm no longer able to play.
He knew his playing career was over. He didn't know his money was virtually gone. When SportsCentury returns, Bobby Orr's life after hockey is marred by revelations of financial treachery.
It's one of the most disgraceful moments in modern American sport, what happened to Bobby Orr.
Orr stepped off the ice to discover that he'd been blindsided by his agent and friend, Alan Eagleson.
Bobby Orr, you have to understand, wanted absolutely nothing to do with anything that wasn't hockey-oriented. And so Alan Eagleson did that for him.
Eagleson promised him he'd be a millionaire by the time he was 28.
All his business and financial affairs, endorsements, were strictly Al Eagleson's department.
Not only had Orr been misled in his financial affairs, he was also shocked to learn that he had been offered a golden opportunity by Bruins president Paul Mooney.
I was sitting in the dressing room and Paul Mooney come in and said, "Bobby, can I talk to you for a minute?" He says, "Get away from me." He says, "You're just trying to drive a wedge between Al and I." And he says, "Bobby, do you know what we're offering you?" And if Bobby had to listen for another 30 seconds, he would have told him that we are offering you 18% of the Boston Bruins.
Bobby Orr had a chance to own part of the Boston Bruins, and Eagleson didn't tell him that, and instead sold him down the river to the Chicago Blackhawks.
I went and saw Bobby. I said, why did you turn that deal down? So I don't turn any deal down. I went, uh-oh.
When I saw the letter that Alan Eagleson wrote declining on behalf of Bobby Orr ownership of the Bruins, I was dumbfounded.
I wasn't paying attention. And, some things that maybe I should have been informed about, I was not.
Eagleson cost Orr millions, but he had even more to answer for after masterminding a scheme to defraud his own union of pension and health benefits.
Bobby Orr literally made him, because then he became the agent for many other players.
What you had here was a lawyer who was an agent that represented as many as 150 players at one time, who ended up being the head of the union boss, the international hockey czar. Take this hat off, put that hat on. It was a hat trick.
We thought he was a god. We thought he was the greatest thing in the world to happen to us. That's how stupid we were. He kept telling us, if you guys got the best pension plan in the world, our pension plan's a joke.
If you look at what he did to the players that he was supposedly representing, the only inference you can draw is that this is the biggest fraud in the history of the sports industry, and we have had our share.
The prominent person he became, he can owe it all to Bobby Orr, and he treated Bobby Orr, as a disposable napkin.
With Orr present in a Boston courtroom, Eagleson pled guilty to fraud in 1998. He would serve 6 months in a Canadian jail and was pressured to resign from the Hockey Hall of Fame.
He was embarrassed. I mean, he recommended him to a lot of people, but he gets snuck into, you see.
On the subject of Al Eagleson, his jaw would clench and he would tense up. You could just feel the betrayal that he felt.
I'll tell you what Eagleson did. He robbed Bobby Orr from the fans of Boston to the end of his career. They never got to see Bobby Orr to see it through.
In the 67-year life of Boston Garden, one of the longest ovations was heard on January 9th, 1979, as Orr's number was raised to the rafters.
For this occasion, in this building, or in any hockey rink, anywhere in the world, the man who definitely needs no introduction, number 4, Bobby Orr. I don't know what to say. I love you all so much. I spent 10 years here in Boston, and they're the 10 best years of my life.
You looked at that night and asked yourself again, why did he ever leave here? Why did he leave Boston?
Everybody's compared to Bobby Orr now. Oh, he's another Orr. He's another Orr. There never will be another Orr.
That was the biggest note I remember in hockey. Coach after coach after coach telling us, pass the puck. You're not Bobby Orr. Nobody's Bobby Orr. There's one Bobby Orr.
Why did Larry Bird, during the national anthems, look up at the Boston Garden ceiling? No one knew. until a night in 1988 when at a dinner Larry Bird explained to an audience, which included Bobby Orr, that what he was doing was looking at Bobby Orr's retired number 4.
When he said that, I'll never forget, Bobby was sitting next to me. He reached over and he just unconsciously grabbed my arm and said, "Oh my God."
Every time I looked up, I always seen the vision of him flying across the ice after he scored a goal. So everybody has their ways of getting motivated, and Bobby always motivated me.
That sort of respect has motivated an entire city to elevate Orr into its pantheon of sports legends.
A local TV station had Williams, Bird, and Orr together, side by side for a panel show. Ted was driven by his son. Larry came in a limo, and Bobby drove himself, you know? And that's, you know, he is and was a man of the people.
Orr created the venue for all the Boston Bruins players to be hugely popular in that era. But it was Orr who was at the top of the pinnacle, and all of us were down. And he was up there. He was the Boston Bruins.
Then you have Dennis Potvin, Paul Coffey, Ray Bourque coming into the league. Now these guys are getting 20, 30 goals. None of that happened without Bobby Orr.
Here's a guy who had the abilities to be a forward, had all the tools, but being put on the defense made him master of the chessboard. And we all learned from that.
Bobby was the man that paved the road for us guys. Gave us some freedom anyway, gave us a chance to express ourselves as players.
When you see that when you're a kid, it kind of gives you not the green light, but that, hey, there's something more than just defense.
By pioneering a new way to play hockey, Bobby Orr is mentioned in the same pantheon as two other immortals.
Bobby Orr, without question, changed the game of hockey maybe more than any player ever did.
I've never seen a guy who dominated both offensively and defensively as much as that young man did.
I like to call them the hockey trinity. Gretzky being the son, Howe being the father, Bobby Orr like the Holy Ghost, because he was truly amazing.
If there is a player that comes along that's just as great or greater than Bobby Orr, I hope the good Lord sees fit to keep me on this earth to see him, because he will be something special.
Injury, followed by treachery, ended Bobby Orr's career all too soon. Although he can't rewrite his story, he took a step towards ensuring that no other hockey prodigy from rural Canada gets fleeced. Bobby Orr became a player's agent in 1996. For ESPN Classic's Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.